Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, we are going to be doing predictions for the upcoming Savage difficulty of the Arcadian Heavyweight tier. I have never been so optimistic about a raid tier coming out ever. Arcadian has been knocking it out of the park. The first two tiers were excellent on the Savage difficulty, and all the normal modes have been pretty good across the board. It's one of the only times I ever thought maybe we could actually get 12 out of 12 good Savage fights in an expansion. Now, of course, with that much excitement, I want to make some predictions. I want to imagine. I think we all like doing that when we see it on normal. Go, man, I wonder how this is going to be on Savage. Well, that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to go through all 4 encounters and just make some basic predictions. Some of them will be absolute nonsense and we'll never see anything like it. Some of them are going to be based really on past patterns. But all the same, get your tinfoil hats on. It's time to predict. Let's go. So starting up, we have M9S, Heavyweight M1S, whatever you want to call it, Vamp Fatal. Now, I like to add a little bit of a disclaimer most of the time with the first fight in the final tier, and that it's normally not as different as the rest of the fights. So a lot of the times we really over-predict encounters like this, just because we see things happening or we start imagining, like, oh my god, they could do this, that, and that. So I totally expect to over-predict this. That being said, P9... back last expansion, actually ended up having a lot of new stuff in Savage. Things that honestly were just kind of unrealistic for us to even predict in the first place. So if it's similar to P9S, we will probably see a mix of those. Yeah, this is like normal, but there's less time, less indicators, blah, blah, blah. And then some like brand new things on top of that. And I totally expect this fight definitely lends itself to having a ton of new things because it's pretty derivative. Shut up, Happy. We don't need to hear that guy. Oh, actually, you guys couldn't even hear it. It was muted in the recording, but I heard my own voice and I didn't want to hear it anymore. So a few of the basics will definitely just be used in a lot of ways. This first little kick of the ball that she does, I fully expect to be there. The big thing I'm actually expecting, though, is clones that do the half moons. I expect her to make like a bat clone that does something similar, or maybe even copies the kicks that she does and then does an AoE on that side. And then placing the bats around the room, they do like a wing flap in the same direction. These bats actually in particular. For example, what if these bats, instead of just doing point blank AoEs, they instead did half room explosions based on the direction that they're facing. And obviously they couldn't be aligned perfectly like this because if she kicked right first, it would be a bit of a problem here because it would just pass through the whole room. So the bats wouldn't be laid out in this particular way, but it is something that they could absolutely do. She shares her ether with a bat and it memorizes the orb kick and then does an AoE on that side. This little slow traveling AoE also is another reason why I think that, because it gradually triggers bats. So having the bats have more than one thing they can do, it would make sense for this gradually traveling out AoE to force, 2 or 3 potential movements from the party. Nothing too complicated, but still something that's really basic. And I do think that that's how this is going to be used large. Because obviously, like, here, it hits the bats in the middle, and then, like, you move into the middle, and the other 2 bats are just kind of useless. So in normal mode, that's very much kind of a very simple thing. Now, this next bit is one of the things I'm most excited about. This is what we call it the A10 moment. So in A10, Alexander's final tier, the second fight, there's basically a mechanic that's exactly like this. It has some different things going for it. So honestly, my prediction is maybe just more things happening here. Maybe towers, maybe lasers that need to be added. Again, clones doing half room AoEs, stricter light party spreads, maybe some debuffs on people. Kind of what's already here, but just put a lot more strictly. It just depends on if they really want to add any sort of strictness to this. I just really hope this is in Savage, because in my opinion, this is a strong identifying piece of this fight. Oh, these leaving behind puddles would definitely not be a surprise. Or those leaving behind bats that then do follow-up attacks based on like an orb kick. And I expect she'll be doing plenty of orb kicks. She'll probably do them from the left and right side. She'll do them from the back of the room like she does here. And I just think a lot of these mechanics are going to be combined more than anything else. And it's nice to have this little mini DPS check so early into the fight. Because like she does one here where you have to be like in and then move out. I could even see you doing this and then needing to be in a near far light party from the actual chain itself. From the buzzsaw itself. That way you can't just like do the positioning. You also need to be in light parties, and then, you have melee range, and then that changes depending on kill times. So just a few things. Just don't accidentally step into the fire here before it goes away, and that should be okay. Moving forward, there's a lot with the saws. It's honestly the saws. The saws have a lot of ways to be used creatively. And it's a matter of, does she want to do them when the arena is not shrunk? Is she only going to, because she only uses the saws when the arena is shrunk in this version. And I also expect a third crowd kill, by the way. So first crowd kill, she gets 1 stack, the orb gets bigger, and she gets a little bit stronger. She gets a few new attacks. I expect a third crowd kill, which will then be even more dangerous on top of what's already there. Add another new mechanic in towards like the last maybe 40% of the fight. And then you have this phase right here where there's a bunch of AoEs around and you just drop a few either cross or X AoEs. There's been a few predictions about these cross or X AoEs. They don't seem to be role-based in any way. I think they might be targeting. I see that they're targeting... What was that? I think that was 1 DPS. So I'm a DPS. I'm trying to see if it's all the roles. I think it's all DPS get one. Yeah, it looks like all DPS got one, and then actually, I saw a few people might have not been. Hold on, I can see right here. Yeah, no, because I can see now. You have BR tank, and then LA. No, there's a Picto out there. Oh no, that's the person standing behind the Pictomancer. I think that has it. No, it's a Picto that has it. So actually, it looks like 1 tank, 1 healer. No, it's both tanks. Okay, I maybe on normal mode it doesn't have roles. Besides the point, the predictions of how these will be used. A, I would expect them to be 8 directional, and B, I bet there's like a light party stack in the middle of the room, and each of these has debuffs. I also think that these AoEs might be near far baited. If anything, the mechanic in M7 where 4 people get the vines and the other 4 people are part of a stack, this seems like a really likely place to get something like that. Could also be with baited AoEs. Could be with bats going off at the same time, would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So I actually expect it to play out a little bit like the M7 mechanic. Because right here, it's just kind of random. It doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason as to why one's an X and one's a cross. So there's also the possibility that the X's and crosses, they'll probably keep them true north so that it's not based on the direction your character is facing, but they could give the player some agency with that if they really wanted to. They could also give us proper X and cross indicators over our heads in Savage, so we know exactly which ones we have, and then with something else going on at the same time, they need to be in the right spot. It could also be like breaking up into light parties afterwards, making sure not all 8 people. It could also have spreads while those are going off. But with the lines on the ground, it shouldn't be too hard. You'll probably just place them in like, you know, a square over either on the corner or directly cardinal of everything. So this section, there's a lot of room for a lot of stuff. There's ads that pop up here. There's buzzsaws going around. There's raid AoEs coming out of the boss. I expect more saws. I expect 4 towers at a time. And then to need basically a group 1 north, group 2 south style like prio system for those towers. And then of course another micro DPS check when it comes to actually dealing with these. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not so simple as just dropping a bunch of them and then needing a DPS check. I think that they might have different kinds. Also, they might have a tank one, and they might have them do some sort of attack while they're charging barbed thrust. If anything, another thing that'd be really interesting is if the boss did a line of sight mechanic that goes off, and then in the last like maybe 2 GCDs before barbed burst finishes casting, you have to kill it. So you have to use it as line of sight, and then you actually need to destroy them at the last second. That would be a nice thing to have to do. I also think that this saw arrangement is just there's nothing wrong with it in terms of simplicity. I just think there's going to be more. And I won't be surprised to see buzzsaws that just actually zip directly across. I think that's also just a really likely thing that is going to happen. Now, let's see. Let's move on. There's a lot. This is actually the phase where I think that the most differences could take place. There's just so much room. I think knockbacks or pull-ins during this. Honestly, given that she's very much about seduction, the fact she doesn't have a single, like, seduction or pull-in mechanic is actually kind of wild. So having things like that here would be really well placed. It'd also just be funny if there was like an opposites attract, or like you know, it's almost like a magnet in a sense, but it's like, you know, opposites attract, so you get pulled towards her, or you know, it's just no eyes for her. I don't know, whatever, some like random debuff names, you know what I'm saying? So it's yeah, that's just a few things that I think would have fit really, really well here while needing to dodge. So honestly, if you throw in some line of sight mechanics with the saws, with the timing, with a pull in, with a push out, you actually don't need to change the arrangement of these much at all. On top of that, every time she does Killer Voice, there's a raid wide here. So there's a lot of already present raid, like repeated raid wide damage, which I think is a good thing to have. So, you know, Sadistic Screech, another raid wide, Killer Voice raid wide. Actually needing to take the tower hit raid wide. It's already looking like a decent amount of party damage that's going to be taken by the party during that phase, which is why I think that they could do minimal exploring with it and make it a big mitt check and just a few minor mechanic checks, and it'd probably be okay. So again, this is the second crowd kill. There's no more after this in normal mode, but I do think there will be a third one in Savage. This makes the tank busters enormous. It makes the half moon AoE even larger. Same deal. I think that she will make clones, either using the bats or just another clone of some kind, or even maybe off the player. Maybe she seduces a player and a player does the AoEs from their side or something like that. But same deal, because that would make even smaller safe zones with the positioning of either the players or the bats, depending on how they're used, especially with the Finale Fatal that we have right here. Finale Fatale. That's not how you say that, but that's why I called it Finale Fatal. Yeah, because this one, nothing really, not much else really happens. Like, you have the Vamp Stomp, which then comes with the bats, and then it's, you know, just not really a whole lot of anything. It's not really less busy, like I get hit here, but that's, you know, there's just, there needs to be something else, you know, it can't just be these circle explosion AoE bats. By the way, I gotta say, Dark Knight's Salted Earth actually confuses me during this phase. Because it's a little, it's not quite the same, like, dark circle. It's, like, a little bit lighter. But when it's on the ground in the middle of all the other things, I get confused by it. So, it's something. I'm a little afraid of having Dark Knights in here. It brings me back to the Bard flaming arrow problem of A Realm Reborn, where people would think that Bard putting a fire arrow on the ground was a bad AoE, and people would move bosses out of it, which is the exact opposite of what you want to do. During hardcore, by the way, I feel like there's got to be some other party mechanic here. There might be like visual tells for, I mean, you even have this. Like, this could be a light party threes while the tanks do their 2 tank busters. So you have like a melee light party and a ranged light party while the two tanks get their busters all the way out in the corner. You could have it so that she has a different animation. They could do a lot of different animation or animation changes. I just think back to when they did, what's her face? Black Cat. Black Cat had a lot of the same mechanics, but then did like a lot of different cast bar names to split into light party, spread, you know, party stack, all that stuff. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of that here. I really just have the question on if they're going to focus more on seduction style mechanics, you know, like uncontrollably walking towards her, being pushed away from her, you know, maybe an ad being the point where you're like attracted to the ad and that's what you get pulled towards. But this one I have a lot of hope for. To me, it's really going to come down to the Buzzsaws and the Finale Fatales, because I bet we're looking at a fight where it's like, you know, Finale Fatale 1, and then Buzzsaw 1, and then Finale Fatale 2, which is after a crowd kill, then Buzzsaw 2, then crowd kill, and then Vamp Fatal. Like, it's really going to be broken down, I feel like, into those 2 main mechanics, and then there's going to be the occasional mechanic in between. And that's going to be kind of how they structure this entire fight. But again, P9 added a good amount of stuff. So there's a lot of room for kind of wilder predictions here. And so I think that I'm actually maybe being even a little timid. Maybe I'm over-psyching myself out of predicting more crazy things. But I think it's just your imagination with the Buzzsaws can just go in so many directions. And the imagination with the bats is kind of the same for me as well. But I'm really hopeful. The normal mode shows a lot of promise with micro DPS checks, ads that need to be, you know, handled correctly and actually killed in a reasonable time frame. And I'm hoping to see more of that. I mean, maybe even the bats could be adds. Maybe we have to kill a specific bat in order to make a safe spot. I don't know. I just feel like that's in the spirit of the fight that we're seeing so far. So that's going to cover all of my predictions for Vamp Fatal. So now we can get into the fight I'm actually most nervous about in Savage with M10. All right, so here we are. Dude, the second fights in all of the Arcadian tiers have been so trolly and memey and funny and fun, in all honesty. From Honeybee Lovely's hardest mechanic being just dodging line AoEs to M6 and their yantastic experience there. M10 is another fight looking to kind of break conventional molds with what we normally get out of Savage fights, in that of a potential 2-target fight. This is not something people are really used to, and optimizing your DPS in a 2-target fight is very, very important. You do not press the same GCDs you've gotten used to pressing all these years. You have to know what is the breakpoint for your AoEs. Then you might need to know target swapping if the breakpoints aren't in, you know, don't allow you to use your AoE skill. So there's a lot of extra DPS bits that go into this. And given they actually nerfed some 2-target, I think specifically Viper got their 2-target nerfed. I think we should expect this to be a mostly 2-target boss fight, kind of similar to the way it is here, where it's 1 target, and then 2-target for the rest. I don't think they're going to combine into like a super boss like what happens back in E6. I don't think we're going to get a Garuda Ifrit combo attack. Rock to Pasta, I think his name was, or something like that. So, but there's one big theme in this fight that I think is going to be evident, and that's going to be using Deep Blue's water attacks to put out Red Hot's fire AoEs, or the AoEs are just going to be too overwhelming. Personally, I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. So the fight starts off just against Red Hot. Honestly, I don't expect too much weirdness to come out of the start here. The big thing again is going to be how they really want to treat these fire AoEs. So right now in normal mode, you drop a few fire AoEs, he aims a few cones at people, and then he just washes them all away, and it teaches people a few things. I can't help but feel like this is a Happy Brambles moment where we're going to have to like bait AoEs from each of the fire. Like there's going to be conal AoEs coming from each of the individual fire puddles that you'll need to bait and then move and then dodge something else right afterwards. Like, I'm so ready for the happy puddles to be a thing. I want to just be clear. I didn't even come up with that strat. My group came up with that strat together, and then my name got slapped to the front of it after I posted our clear VOD. Nothing like waking up to 50,000 views on a clear VOD and going, oh no. Yeah, and then the fire cones from here. I think, you know what, actually? Now I do have a full prediction. Put the fire puddles down, bait fire cones from each of the puddles, and then bait fire cones from the boss, and then need an open spot to deal with something else afterwards. That's not really all that complicated, but that would be very much in line. Actually, though, you know, it's funny. There are parts of this boss that are not too dissimilar from E9, where the boss like jumps to the side. There is actually like particle beam style mechanics in this fight already. So now I'm even like, I'm even more, I'm not going to say sure of the prediction, but I feel better about the prediction as a whole. Like, it wouldn't surprise me to have, honestly, I think that there is a wasted opportunity in normal mode here, where when you're just fighting Red Hot, and I guess this is just because they wanted to do the whole, oh, surprise, they're going to fight us at the same time. Obviously not really. But to have Deep Blue kind of surfing along the outside and doing things from there, I think is kind of a lost opportunity. But also, again, with normal mode, not too much of a surprise. And they do a lot of that when they do the combined phase. I just thought they might have done it here. So, you know, after you do just a few of those cones and baited AoEs, then Deep Blue comes out. And I think that it's still kind of important for them to do it this way, where you get to see each of their Savage mechanics individually. Now, 6 Swell is almost certainly going to have light party stacks or spread stacks or whatnot, because the way the room splits here, and the way there's always 2 lanes that are safe out of the... Well, actually, let me rephrase that. As of right now, there's 2 lanes that's safe. So you can see Deep Blue, he basically just washes through the middle and does a bigger AoE, but he can also be on the left or right. And then you need to, you know, dodge this attack while being knocked back. It just makes kind of logical sense to have light party and pair stacks as kind of like lined up from north to south here. But that's while there's no fire puddles in the middle of the room. The fire puddles in the middle of the room that come later kind of make that a much more arduous task. And it also depends on if they make this knockback even further when we get it on Savage, or if they keep the knockback the same. Because if the knockback is the same as it is here, you could actually be in about the middle of the room and take the knockback and ride it towards the back of the room, and then they can still do light parties and pairs as well. They could also have Red Hot surf one of the waves. I know he rides the Inferno, as he likes to say a bunch, but he could do this. Honestly, Red Hot making a fire wave is also a not too unlikely thing. Whether or not it'll just knock back or it'll have a different effect altogether is a bit of a question mark. Heck, he can even do smaller fire waves. Oh, yeah, if he does smaller fire waves that come from the left and the right and wash through as you're being knocked back, and then they get hit by this, they would explode. So that's another possibility right there. I mean, there's no fire waves at all, so I definitely like to see that. We can see where it goes through, it splits the room down the middle. So you can see what I mean by like having 2 light parties and having 4 pair stacks right there. Now we also have the tricks, the deep varial. The only move he has here is deep varial. And this is what I meant by, this is kind of like Cloud of Darkness with the particle beams, where, you know, it goes to the wall and then bam, like literally that is Cloud of Darkness's particle beam mechanic. And there were all sorts of things that came with the particle beam mechanic, whether that was, you know, tanks needing to be in a... Basically, there would be like 2 tank busters and then 2 light party stacks, but they would either be cones or they would be circles. So, for example, here you would have, I guess, a light party on each side, and then after the big wave goes out, you would maybe have the tanks run all the way out. It wouldn't go... I mean, they could do smaller ones and have it go off at the exact same time as well. But if they're willing to do it in Cloud of Darkness, and that's the first fight of that tier, then they should be willing to make the tanks run all the way out here. And then it's also possible that there's fire puddles in the room, similar... Again, I'm literally... Now I'm imagining it's just happy brambles, but anytime anything's hit by water, it does an explosion. Which would then mean when the tanks get hit by... Oh, an AoE. Maybe the tanks take a... Oh, yeah! Red Hot could do a tank buster on the tanks from here, and then hit the party with something as well. Yeah, okay. That tracks. I actually think this will play a lot like Cloud of Darkness's particle beam mechanic. Which means I also expect there to be another trick, and a point blank makes the most sense. I don't know how I didn't think about this until I started recording this, but yeah. So like this one's a cone, but in reality could also do like, instead of a deep varial, it could be a deep... I don't know. I don't know trick names off the top of my head. I haven't played Tony Hawk in recent years, and I haven't played a surfing game ever. So it's just, I don't know, just another trick name, or even just something varial, and it's like, you know, swirling varial. I don't know. All the same. Yeah. But I just expect that to not only be a cone, and to expect tank busters and light party stacks. They could also just do a full-on spread. There's enough room for some of those to just do an actual spread itself. And then for them to be staggered like one at a time mechanically. Okay, so this is where they both join at the same time. I don't think this introduction is probably not going to be any different. And it'll probably happen at about the same point in the fight, like very early on. The real question is will they both surf in one direction? Or will they actually like... See, the reason they both surf from one direction here is because they crash into each other like that and then do the pulsing AoE with the Extreme Spectacular. I don't expect anything to be different there. Like they could add more, but they could just also make it do more damage, and then it's not really a concern. They could also make it so you can't put all 8 on one side, but again, I don't really think that's super important. These towers leaving a Vuln stack. I actually wouldn't be surprised if these were enumeration towers. So one thing they could do here is all 4 of these towers could add up to 8 enumerations, and you could have... The first tower is 1, and the second tower is 3, and then the third tower is 2, and then the last tower is 2. And effectively, you need a 1 through 8 priority, so people need to pay attention to the tower, remember their point in the order, and make sure that they get into the tower. So it's a little bit variable. Yeah, yes, I'm pulling from an ultimate with that prediction, but I think that's a good place to do it. And then Deep Blue starts working on his 6 swell here. And we also get a tank buster. I wouldn't be surprised to have the tank buster into tank swap here. I think it's still going to be very basic. That's a shared buster. That's fine. But I think they could also do like a tank swap. It could also leave fire on the ground. Now, here's the one where I'm not sure how they would do it. So you can see the knockback distance is actually really short here. So I'm like almost in the middle of the room, and I basically just get knocked to the back half of the middle of the room. Even if they doubled that length, you could still, in theory, have a situation where... There's a party that gets knocked to the middle of the room and a party that gets knocked all the way to the back of the room. or a pair, I should say, and then having them in each of the columns here. And then, of course, I also said you could also only have one safe column, and then, you know, you just have to make sure you're in the one safe column. And then even then, they could do that with light parties. It's honestly even still doable with pairs, especially if you use knockback resist, if knockback resist still works in Savage. But here's the big thing. You can see when the water hits the fire, it does these explosions. And I think we're going to have to cleanse a lot of these puddles, or our placement of the puddles is going to determine the otherwise available safe places. I also think there's going to be more than one split damage AoE there, so there's going to be even more puddles on the ground. I also think these are going to be baited from the boss. There may even be situations... I think we're going to have to clean the fire puddles away using the water, which doesn't really make a lot of sense because Diver's Dare gets rid of fire puddles here. But it could be that Diver's Dare actually sets off all the puddles. So if you have bad puddle placement or you don't clean the right puddles, you're guaranteed to wipe, so you just need to know. And there's a lot of things they can do. They could do like a basic Protean. They could do, you know, pairs and light party Proteans as well. They don't even have to use Proteans. They could do other things. Now, this part I think is going to be fun because, again, I think this part is going to involve needing to have like a fire group cleanse or a water group cleanse a fire group. So, like, for example, we have these two fire AoEs back here, and those are going to persist. But if you aim a water at them during this phase, they still explode as if, you know, you were aiming... you know, as if it was any other phase. So I think there's going to be some... You're not just going to aim these at the wall. You're going to, like, aim these across the room in some capacity. I also wouldn't be surprised if they swapped the focus target. So, like, for example, if you're marked for fire here, you're marked for fire the whole time. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, like, a trick and then swapped, so you end up marked for water. I also wouldn't be surprised if they just choose to straight up swap positions with like a cast bar or something like that. So you have to know to go to the other side of the room and take that spot as well. But yeah, look, they're all stacked up here. So you got to know, like I got a Layden's Bite. I got to try to save my 2-target skills for times like that. Yeah, and you've got the deep varial here. So like he's just walking around here. I sincerely doubt he's just going to walk around here. Like there's going to be something else that's going on there. That's much more. But I do think it is going to be a lot of, like, the interactions between the two of them. And not so much them kind of just doing things at the same time. Like here, you'll see here, like, there's a bunch of AoEs that spawn from hitting the water. Like, look at that big line of AoEs as it passes through. And so I think that they're going to make it so that that's me trying to figure out who I want to blast. And I choose you. I will also wonder if they'll be kind of strict about the fire overlapping. If there'll be like something extra bad for fire overlapping with fire. That would make a lot of sense too. Like it just like enhances it or like makes it even larger than it's supposed to be. That would be perfectly logical. At this point, we've seen all the things that are kind of easy to predict. And then it's just going to be a matter of, is there going to be like debuff vomit during the Surf's Up phase? Is there going to be something else that like determines tower order here? So again, I feel like I'm being a little timid. But it's because the mechanics are really simple here, and the prediction is kind of just based on what we're seeing, and not about what we're not seeing. Because I don't know, I just don't want to make like a nonsense prediction based on absolutely nothing. And at the same time, I want to do that a ton because it's another one of those fights where there's just a lot of possibilities when you have these mechanics that affect you. Honestly, I think the biggest thing to predict is that there will be mechanics that we don't see here, but they also leave behind puddles or interact with the puddles, whether it's deep blue or red hot. I would also like to see some water puddles and have red hot have the ability to also trigger an effect from those. Since it works the one way, I'd like to see it work the other way as well, but have a different effect altogether. But the big thing you need to start doing now, I would practice this fight and practice your 2-target motions a lot, because it is going to be invaluable for you to be knowledgeable about how your 2-target actually looks like. Same way with M6, where people needed to learn how to do proper ad phase and target swapping and all that stuff. That's the skill I think that a lot of people don't focus on, that they need to focus on for this encounter. So that's my only piece of advice. Other than that, just think a lot about the interactions between the fire and water and how they're going to work, and go back and watch Cloud of Darkness, because I do think that a lot of the Cloud of Darkness stuff, not the tiles, they could do the tiles. There could be like a ground AoE that they just put down that you have to interact with. But yeah, I also fire tornadoes. 100% expect a fire and water tornado phase where they kind of like, it's not too dissimilar to something like A3, Living Liquid, but with both fire and water and different effects. So Phoenix and Living Liquid, I guess both would be good examples for a lot of people. And those having all their own effects as well, and them being able, like, you know, Red Hot here, being able to target the water tornado with something, and the water, and that triggering the water tornado's attacks, and like who's tethered by the water tornado will go off whenever his AoEs actually interact with it. But maybe you also need to shrink the tornadoes by deliberately hitting them. So you need to kind of alter which one you're hitting with AoEs and who's doing it. Oh yeah. See, now my mind's racing a little bit. But I expect a lot of stuff like that. And I expect that actually might be a little bit of an intermission phase. Wouldn't be too surprised if both of them just start kind of doing a swirl, like they do a trick in the center of the room that creates the tornado. You know, so they're like surfing around the... Oh, yeah, they could summon the tornadoes and then surf around them in the middle, like in the front, like in the left side and right side of the room, in the middle of the room. And it's like, oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, that would be a nifty thing. Okay. Look, all right, my mind's going a little bit more. But I think that's where I'll wrap. I think that's going to be the last, like, major prediction for the second fight. Now we get to go into the third and fourth fights, which I think a lot is riding on these two encounters in particular. All right, so the third fight against the Tyrant, this actually, there's so much pressure on this fight being good. Not just because I want all 12 fights to be good, but because he is the grand champion. We have, in the previous tiers, the final fight has been, I mean, I guess technically Brute Bomber was the grand champion. He was the highest ranked light heavyweight competitor. And then Eutrope comes out, and she was actually ranked where the extremes were. So the fight we just did before this. So she was ranked in heavyweight, but she was ranked where the extremes are, right below the Tyrant. And so that doesn't, I guess, necessarily change the way things are, but I guess that kind of makes it weird. My point is if this guy's supposed to be the champion, his fight should be pretty grand. And given that we fought Howling Blade, and Howling Blade was champion, and I know Savage is an embellishment, but I feel like the Tyrant kind of needs that same level of embellishment where it needs to be like a really extra weird fight. And if it's not, I think that's actually going to be kind of a letdown in that sense. Now, I don't expect them to go crazy and have like, there's no phase 2 music. We already have the Orchestrions in game. So you can actually go to your Orchestrion and see like all the music for Arcadian and Arcadian Savage, mind you. And he doesn't have anything new. So I don't expect anything like that. I just think they need to go a little overboard with the Tyrant. But honestly, I think the easiest prediction here, yeah, he has an axe. Yeah, he has a scythe. Yeah, he has a, what's it called? A big sword. He is a weapon master. He needs more than 3 weapons, you know? He definitely should have, at the very least, one more weapon. Like, maybe, like, he should have a staff, and he should have a bow. Like, bow makes a lot of sense. A 270-degree AoE bow, like Shiva, makes a lot of sense. A staff also. Like, I get that he's got, like, heavy-hitting weapons. Like, he's got DPS. I guess he doesn't always have DPS weapons. He has a Dark Knight sword. But, like, the point is if he's going to be a weapon master, he can have more than 3 weapons. And then they can have more effects around the map. So that's, like, the easy prediction that I have. This, I don't really know what else to say. This is just kind of, like, that's fine. Like, that can go longer. There can be other mechanics happening at the same time as that. But it's kind of basic. And I think that... Oh! Really easy prediction. Really easy. So for every time he pulls out a different weapon here, when he pulls out the axe, it could be out and spread. Or a glowing axe can mean, like, out and spread, and a not glowing axe can mean, like, out and protean or something. Like, that's another really easy way for them to add a lot to this. Because, right, like, I mean, look, if he did this in Savage, like... we couldn't just all sit under the scythe, which of course I don't think they would want. But like, let's say when he does the axe hit, he then, if it's a glowing axe, then that means we all need to spread. So we would actually want to be kind of focused around where the scythe is and make sure to spread for that. But then maybe the scythe is light parties where we have to be on separate. It could even be scythe pairs. There's enough room to do scythe pairs in here as well, or even scythe protean. In protean is a totally free. Honestly, I think for scythe and axe, they could do like protean or pairs for both, and then it's like depending on whether or not it glows. And then for the big sword, they could kind of do the same. They could do, yeah, I mean, they could do protean repairs for pretty much all 3 of those weapon types. And even if they were to add another weapon like a bow or a staff, you could technically do the same thing for that as well. I also think this Dance of Domination attack is going to be seen a lot more and is going to be used to split the party a lot more. And I also hope he kind of does it with other weapons that have other layouts, or maybe like something else happens here. This actually might be too basic of a mechanic for them to even include, or they might include just a few slices, like he does like 1 slice at a time, or does just not like all the slices at once and then they resolve. There's not really a whole lot you can innovate on with that. And so I think they kind of need to be like more reserved, like less slices, but more strategically placed slices. And even staggered slices, which is a pretty normal thing. They do that in Criterion, and they've done that in other fights, where they have the cascading AoEs, or they have, you know, back-to-back AoEs that go off 1 at a time, and then there's a little bit of a memory game that comes in. You also have this phase, which, again, if there's more weapon types, adds on a lot. Also, certainly a raid-wide right after the 1 HP check, or even a Doom check after the 1 HP check. Like, come on, you got to do that. So yeah, and then this gives you a lot less time to react. So this can even, honestly, this doesn't even need to be that fundamentally different. It just needs to be, wait a minute. Oh, you know what? Okay, I have even more precedent for the whole weapon is glowing thing. I forgot this happens during the Charybdis mechanic. If you notice, he actually puts wind around the weapons that spawn the Charybdis tornadoes, which is a classic Behemoth thing. So honestly, having wind, having fire, having lightning, all makes sense. Yeah, so that's, they could do all that kind of stuff. Now I'm even more convinced. Sorry, I think I just hit my microphone. I'm even more convinced they're going to do something like that, because it just makes too much sense. I hate the way these are shaped, by the way, these AoEs. The way they present, because they're not like perfectly centered in the middle of the room. Yeah, so that's definitely a big one. And then Immortal Rain. So talking about having more weapons, when he gets further and further into the fight, he basically gives up using the weapons altogether and focuses more on kind of raw brute strength. And then I guess you could kind of say he goes to using his fists, so that becomes his like last weapon type once he's in this mode right here and the arena goes red, because now he's doing Behemoth mechanics. Now he did the Charybdis before this, now he's doing Meteor Rain, and then he's, you know, he just does a bunch of Behemoth stuff at this point. These towers also, you know, 4 and 4. These could also do enumerations, but I don't think they're going to recycle that 2 fights in a row. These tank busters hitting like a truck, this being, you know, light party or stacks. I also think that the players are going to be the ones dropping the meteors here. It could be instead of towers, it's player dropped meteors. And then also, even if it's exactly like this, where it's set tower locations and then he does a double, I think that there's going to be locations in such a way that you can't just, you know, effectively in normal, you're just looking for where there's 2 back-to-back meteors. I think he's also going to like cut off half of the room. And so there's really only going to be 1 safe quadrant here. And then even then, there might be like on the first hit, something goes off. So like players actually can't be all, like right now we're just hiding 2 meteors back and that's all there is to it. But making it so you can't be 2 meteors back immediately is probably a good idea. Like AoEs that go off on the players right before the first hit, and then AoEs that go off on players right before the second hit. So that way you can't all just hide behind the second one the entire time, because you would destroy it early. On top of only 1 actual corner being safe for that mechanic. Just a lot of overlapping things to make managing the meteors a much bigger pain. Not too dissimilar. Again, P9 has Behemoth mechanics, so a lot of the stuff that's in P9, especially when it comes to the meteors, actually make for good examples here. It's just a matter of how deep in that direction they want to go. For this, almost certainly, I actually expect, if they don't do the portals here, I expect these to be baited on players, and players to be shooting them across the room. And then for there to really only be like 1 arrangement that works for any given set of mechanics. And then also, I expect those proximity AoEs to be flare markers on the tanks, instead of like the meteors hit the tank position. And so they need to be in 1 safe spot while the rest of the party is in another safe spot. It's definitely a really basic one. Yeah, because like even right there, it would make perfect sense. And here, like the tank was on the other side, like on the other side of this, and then the remaining 3 people that are on that side. Now, this is another thing. I expect there to be some patterns where there's 8 of these markers, And I also expect there to be some sort of additional reason for you to be launched or knocked in any particular way. So for example, in this first one, you can get knocked to the other side, you get knocked to the same side, and it doesn't really matter. But having it so there's 8 of them, and then maybe you need to, when you land, you do a spread AoE, or you land and you do a stack. So I expect debuffs to be placed on the party, and for you to have to know the debuff order, and then to ride these. And I don't expect it to be the same tower arrangement every time, and I don't expect it to be the same debuff arrangement, so there's quite a few different solutions that can come out of that. But you only need 1 person in each of these to make sure they don't kill everyone, and then anyone who's hit does actually go flying. Like, not everyone has to get hit. Only 1 person actually has to get hit by each of those towers to make it so they don't blow up. And so, yeah, I think that something like that is going to happen with those, where you just have to really know. And then, hey, yeah, here, you have, I assume this would be another, you know, situation where a tank meteor and the rest of the party. And then this where he tosses the arena. Again, this is really basic, so I would still expect a debuff to be resolving here. They could also do it so, like, you have a debuff that resolves right before the tower hit. So, like, what if you had a spread around the tower before the tower hit actually goes off? So you can't, like, just all go to the tower immediately. You kind of have to be a little away from it. And then the arena toss. I wouldn't be surprised to see a double arena toss here. If you have to send yourself back to the other side. Or, like, he summons another... There's, like, another arena spot. Like, honestly, if they really wanted to... Oh, yeah, but there's no additional arena spots, I guess, in the normal mode version of the map. I was going to say they could do something where they, like, create a new platform that's, like, Savage exclusive. And that would be pretty cool. Heartbreak Kick. I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised to see Heartbreak Kick in Savage as well. I mean, it's basically J-Kicks from A8S. Just, you know, it's those 5 pulses and then a second one. Yeah, he does a second one in a row right here. They could also do it where, like, this is a tank tower, and then the people around the tower need to actually do... I mean, that would be really cool if this was actually a tank buster instead on Savage, and then the other players have, like, a mechanic happening every time it pulses. So, like, it's like pulsing, like, the nearest 3 players get, like, a conal AoE, and so you have to go in and out and in and out. So, like, every pulse, so, like, hits the tanks right here, 3 people get ready to bait. On first pulse, bait. Second pulse, bait. Third pulse, bait. So you're, like, swapping who are the 3 in and the 3 out, so, like, 1 healer and 2 DPS each time. And then also, if those left behind fire behind, so you couldn't just, like, go to the same 3 spots, you had to, like, rotate over a little bit each time. That would be really cool. So there's a few predictions. Also, ground AoEs chasing players is a great way to mess people up when it comes to positioning. So I expect to see a lot of meteors, baited meteors being dropped all over the place. I just think that's going to be happening with so many mechanics here in the last phase. Because all those mechanics in the last phase, it's all just a bunch of meteor mechanics. Like, just a ton of different versions of meteor mechanics. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if during the Heartbreak Kick, if there's meteor towers that need to be taken at the same time. So you need to do your positioning based on the meteor towers that are going off. Like, just meteor, like meteor. Meteors are coming out of the portals. Boss did a meteor earlier. Meteors everywhere. Meteors. I also expect more Charybdis. And I actually do think they might not abandon the weapons in this phase. They might, like, have some way to keep the weapons involved. But it really depends on if they want to do what is effectively Behemoth Savage. Or more Savage, because P9 is also Behemoth Savage when it comes to the mechanics from this one. But I think there's an entire phase we're not seeing here. I think that they've got something else for him that's going to be extra special because he's the grand champion. And there's, like, literally, like, 40% of the fight where we have no idea. Like, I think all the things I predicted are the first, like, 60% of the fight, at most the first 70%, and that there's going to be something, like, holy, like, he's going to be, like, this, he's going to grow, like, 7 arms and have, like, all, he's going to turn into Behemoth Gilgamesh or something like that. And he's going to have all the weapons and all the Behemoth mechanics and be able to empower them with the different elements, with his meteors, with his Charybdis and all that. And there's going to be, like, some big phase where it's just, like, a giant weapon massacre of some kind. I think he's going to do something extra special at the end. And I kind of hope he does. Again, he's the grand champion. I don't want him to just feel like a third fight. I actually want him to kind of feel like the final fight. And they've done this well before. 011 is a great example of a fight that feels like a final fight, even though it's not the final fight. So I'm hoping to get something of similar quality to the 011 encounter. I'm really excited to see this one. Dude. Also, I gotta say, I love all the themes, but this is probably my favorite theme to do the fight to of all of the four new musics. Like, yes, Everything Burns is great, but I get really pumped when I'm doing the Tyrant and I hear the music in the background, and I play with my music on when I prog. And while I think I'm gonna like M10's music, I just think this is gonna be my favorite one to prog with the music on, just personally speaking. So with that, we can actually go into the final fight. I'm skipping ahead a little bit. Let me do the edit cut, and let's go to the final fight. And finally, we come to the last fight in the tier and in all of the Arcadian, Lindworm, or just the president, CEO, whatever you want to call him. This is one of those fights where you can really tell they're holding back on you on normal mode, but you can still see some of the DNA. I think the big thing is whether or not we're seeing a door boss or we're seeing a full, non-door boss, it's hard to tell at this point. I really can't. I think we're only seeing about half the fight. There is an Orchestrion role that is phase 2 exclusive in the Orchestrion now, and it's actually the music that plays in the cutscene after this. So if you watch the story and you listen to the cutscene and the music that's in the cutscene after you defeat the Lindworm, that track is in the Orchestrion as a Savage exclusive track. So, I mean, it just makes the most sense. It's literally called the Arcadian, and it's a medley of all the fighters. So obviously we have to do a bit of predictions when it comes to that, but let's focus on the Lindworm first. The Lindworm looks like it's actually going to have a decent amount of debuff vomit. So I expect a lot of giving players 3 or 4 debuffs and having to resolve it with the other mechanics and not kill the other players on the screen. Some of the mechanics really based, like Bloodshed here. Obviously, this is going to be a 2-part either tank bust. It's either going to be a 2-part tank buster, or it's going to be, back-to-back slams on each side. Like, that's just going to happen at several points throughout the fight. I don't think anyone's really surprised by that. Also, double Ravenous Reach, really easy prediction. So, like, this one goes to the right side of the room. Don't be surprised to have the left arm, like, go to the back of the room or the front of the room, or, even both of them to go to the same side of the room, kind of, and just be, like, slightly off-center, so there's a really small safe spot. Double arm, I honestly, I think a lot of the predictions for this, you could boil down to double everything. Like, these giant expanding gloops. I actually expect some of these to be on players, as well as, some ground-baited ones. I expect that to be an actual debuff, basically a defamation on players in the Savage equivalent. And Cruel Coil, I actually am really excited for. So Cruel Coil actually kind of gives you the DNA of a lot of really good mechanics here. If you have debuffs, there's all sorts of things you can do. You can have a Beyond Death debuff where you actually have to stay in the middle. You can have debuffs like Light Party stacks, or maybe you are not allowed to leave the coil until, I don't know, you DPS him enough and then he opens up a section during his rotation, or maybe you need to cleanse a debuff before leaving, or you die even if you do leave. Also, another big thing is after he lets you go, he basically immediately begins spinning. It wouldn't be too unreasonable to have certain roles that need to leave before others. Like maybe tanks have to leave first because there's a tank buster debuff going off at this time. So like both the tanks need to get out and then also separate and not hit the players in the center of the room with a big AoE of some kind. And then after the tanks leave, he does another rotation. And now the healers are going to have light parties, but you don't want to leave, so nobody wants to leave during the second one because the healers have light party stacks, so you need to be in light party stacks in the middle. And maybe even the tanks need to return and get back into the middle for those light party stacks. And then finally, you have the last rotation, and the last rotation could be like, spread and then exit, because if you try to exit right now while everyone has a spread marker, there's no real good way of doing it. Maybe you could assign some people to do it and others to not do it. Or maybe you have to resolve all the mechanics, or when you leave, you get pulled back into the middle. There could be a DPS check for like a chain that holds you in the middle as well. There's a lot of possibilities that they could do. There could even just be towers along the outside. And they could be roll towers, like tanks need to leave for a specific type of tower. And then, so you have to watch the tower spawns to know which roll is actually leaving next. And so you have to, there's a lot of, like this mechanic actually, I think is like one of the most wild ones to predict, because it could have absolutely nothing and be kind of like, I guess, like you can't really do it like chains in Quantum, where there's like 2 different exit points, and then you have to like break in specific directions, and then when those expire, there's also an AoE. Unless they open up a second spot here. I wonder if they would even do like knock-up towers like the Tyrant to send you over the sides of the snake, so some people can exit, but some people have to stay and use the towers. I don't know, dude. My mind actually goes wild with this mechanic. They could even have a Beyond Death where you actually have to be squished by, but maybe if the boss squishes no one, it actually results in a failure. So the designated squisher needs to somehow like get to the middle. They could even just make the squish a tank buster, and then if nobody gets, like, it could be the equivalent of a tank buster tower. If no one gets squished, it just something happens that just doesn't isn't good for the party. There's a lot of possibilities for that, so it's pretty exciting. It's nice having the boss have a hitbox there. Yeah, like, so you could have 2 of these, but like much bigger visceral bursts going into that later part. Also, visceral bursts, it only hits the tanks, but the AoE gives everyone an animation. Almost certainly that's going to apply a debuff of some kind, or it's going to be like different names for the skills followed by, you know, spreads or stacks or whatever. Like, I refuse to believe that's ever just going to be 2 tank busters with that animation. I'd normally be okay with that prediction, but the animation just tells me otherwise. All right, Serpentine, Scourge, whatever. You know, we predicted that already. Whether or not they want to combine it with anything. So Grotesquerie is the one that gives you debuffs. So it's really going to be Grotesquerie 1, Grotesquerie 2, Grotesquerie 3. Like, those are going to be the big things. And this kind of, again, teases you, you know, everyone has a spread here, and then the head is going all the way to the other side. And then, you know, there's another mechanic, and then the spread. So the boss drops all these gloops, and then we have spreads. Like, again, this just... effectively, imagine all of these things happening much faster together, and with different types of debuffs, and then having them staggered. And you suddenly have, like, a lot of things. Like, these can also just leave poison puddles on the ground. Or those can all also spawn the giant expanding AoEs, the Grotesquerie AoEs, or they could even just be larger. They could be the size of those, or they could be a different debuff that is the equivalent of them. Again, like, even though they very clearly cut a lot from this fight, it actually gives you enough to imagine a lot of not too surprising Savage related stuff. This I expect to play out like P12. P12 has a phase that splits the arena like this, and your biggest tell is briefly, for literally 3 seconds here, you have the debuff Fate of the Worm, which does not allow you to jump. So whatever platforms you're on, you're stuck on. And then it goes away, like here. You'll see it literally right now. It's going to go away, like as soon as the platform spawns right here. Right there. So nothing happens there on normal. Very clearly, you're going to need to split into very specific groups for that on Savage. And so that screams P12, because P12 has a phase that works exactly like that. So towers or heads. Oh, you know what? Honestly, given what happens right afterwards, baiting head AoEs like this wouldn't be surprising at all. Like, these heads just pop up and blast these 2 sections right here. But don't be surprised if those heads pop up while the arenas are actually split like that. And you have to, like, bait them in a specific way. And then there's towers, and then there's all sorts of paths. I actually think this is going to be very similar to the P12S. I forget the name of the phase, but just something like that. Yeah, and then there's a bunch of spreads. I think we're seeing a lot of mechanics we're going to see with the arenas fully split here, including this Grotesquerie. Because mind you, this Grotesquerie can actually be handled on a single platform. I think even when it's broken, it just doesn't send you very far. So, like, it sends you just barely the size of a platform back. So if you were all the way forward or all the way back, it could be resolved. So I think that a Grotesquerie, while the arena is completely split, is, again, another thing that's not too unreasonable. And again, this Grotesquerie actually gives you 2 debuffs. It gives you that knock forward, and then it gives you these, which I think there's going to be a little bit more to these, because right now these are just kind of whatever. These are attention checks. So it's going to be a question of how they really want to make that more interesting. There's some ways. I mean, we had that in, what was it, P6? And they did make it more interesting there by, you know, making you do it alongside of other AoEs and also freezing the players in place briefly. So, you know, they couldn't adjust at the last second or anything like that. So it's going to be a matter of giving players different ones and then having to assign them very specific positions to make sure that they don't kill everyone. And then also you not accidentally using a skill in, like, turning around or something in that vein. But at this point, we've seen most of the things that Lindworm can do. So I think, like, Cruel Coil, I do think Cruel Coil 1 and Cruel Coil 2 will be different. But I mean, there's nothing more I can add prediction-wise for Cruel Coil 2, because any of the things I said before could apply to this one as well. It just needs to be done differently than the first one is done. And I think the next Grotesquerie has a lot more debuffs attached to it. So I think that pretty much covers all of Lindworm. Like, oh, I guess there is the quote enrage sequence that we get later. Will that be? It's a good question of whether or not that'll even be in Savage. I don't know. I mean, even if it is, it won't be in its exact same form. I would actually sooner expect them to just kind of work that into the last like 20% here instead of it being another full health bar, even if it's a smaller health bar. But I mean, they could. It's not too unreasonable to have a phase like that. That's like a big damage check on the entire party, like a big raid damage check on the entire party. There's spreads, there's dodges. Like they could add some extra things there. They can add a Grotesquerie debuff on something that isn't just the spread. And then there's a little bit more like specific movement. Plus, you know, you can put a lot of pressure on players, but it screams normal mode unless you really want to add like some sort of positioning check. Great example is Queen Eternal. Like Queen Eternal has an enrage sequence in normal and then has an enrage sequence like a I'm pissed off second health bar mode. Well, in normal mode, it's not a pissed off second health bar mode. It's the rest of my health bar is my pissed off mode. And then in Savage, it's here's my second health bar and I'm pissed off. And they managed to make it work there by, you know, having the arenas rotate. But then there's also just a huge amount of raid damage on the party. You know, light party stacks, you know, the pushbacks on people, on top of, you know, just it's a lot. It just adds up to be a lot. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a Queen Eternal style one. I just wonder, they would have to be very creative about destroying the arena while it's being done. And so it probably wouldn't be exactly the same where, you know, he just kind of randomly slams places. It could be that maybe he shatters certain ones and then breaks. Like you have to know, like, because they're going to break, like how to safely get onto the right platform based on which side of the room he's going to cleave from. They could do that. I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that phase absolutely needs to be in Savage, because I think in Savage, we're literally going to get a phase where he absorbs like all of the powers of all of the sleeping, well, of all of the immortalized around the room. Because the last track being called the Arcadian and being a medley of all the tracks, and especially heavily featuring, like, you can hear some of Brute Bomber in there. You could hear some of, Wicked Thunder. You can hear Howling Blade. You can hear a lot of the major themes. Either they're assisting us in that last phase and the lindworm is going to like get really cracked out, or the lindworm is just straight up going to absorb a lot of the immortalized and become this like unstoppable like god that has the powers of all of the Arcadian fighters, which is something that sounds far more ultimate like. But I mean, I guess it's not that surprising. I mean, again, going back to not Pandemonium, going back to Eden. I mean, we borrowed all the attacks from the different primals in there. Is it really that different than that? You know, having a Wicked Thunder phase, having a Howling Blade, like having phases that are like ultra representative of all of the Arcadian fighters that we fought up to that point. No, I don't think it is. It's just a question of down the line, what will they do for Ultimate? Because again, that just sounds very Ultimate-esque. But we can't be worried about that. We need to worry about the fight that's actually right in front of us now. And I would also like to maybe not see something so blatant as that. I would like to, yeah, would it be cool to, like, when I say it out loud, it sounds kind of cool, right? Like, oh, yo, yeah, he's going to be, like, mixing Wicked Thunder with Howling Blades. And it's like, I mean, yeah, it's been cool before. It's been done before. But wouldn't I rather see something that's, like, not just rehashed, like, remixed versions of the mechanics I already saw earlier? Like, we know what that's like in Ultimate. I don't know if I want it in the Savage and then, you know, 6 years from now get it in the Ultimate as well. But, I mean, it's got to be something. The name The Arcadian and the medley of all the character themes that they used in the story, like, the fact that that's the Savage theme, it's got to be indicative of something, right? Like, I can't be crazy about that. So it's really just a matter of how far are they willing to go with the idea of that song being called The Arcadian. And, you know, are we going to just, how far are they going to go? I think Lindworm is actually going to be really good. I was a bit taken aback by seeing Lindworm. I didn't even dislike Lindworm. I just, compared to all the other characters and fighters that have voice lines and music, like, it's not like the music's really good here. But the Lindworm is a rather standard boss. And I think the second phase really needs to exemplify its place as a contender in the Arcadian. And given that the president loved the Arcadian and loved watching the fighters and just was like, you know, he was still trying to pay his penance, but he's a huge showman. And a Royal Rumble is literally the showman's dream. And so just getting all of the mechanics involved, getting everything involved, it just sounds like something the president would want. Even as the lindworm, I feel like he would go out of his way to make that happen. So I'm really hoping that they go that route with it and just go absolutely nuts with all the Arcadian fighters involved, whether they're on our side or the lindworm, like just copies a bunch. I don't care what it is. They need to go extra ham on the finale with this one. It needs to almost feel like an ultimate in a sense to match the grandeur of a lot of the previous encounters and to match the overall vibe of the Arcadian leading up to this point. So I've got my hopes up, and I'm really, really excited to see what they've got for us on January 6th. But that is going to be a wrap for this video. I've covered all 4 fights in my predictions. Let me know some of your predictions in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned. I'll be continuing to post all the stuff on patch 7.4, some prediction pieces, some opinion pieces, etc., etc. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Until then, take care.